All right. Okay. Let's see. Let's see what we get here. Any problem you have to follow, because I move.
Yeah, we follow you.
I need to see the script. Well, it's very nice here. They put the, wow, this is good.
So you see it? Good.
Yeah, so you have feedback.
Oh yes, of course.
Huh?
Yeah, of
I
course.
feel like Obama, you know,
Yeah,
1, 2, 3, you.
Except for teleprompter, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but it is teleprompter. Can you not the I know because it's a duplicate.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's a duplicate. Yeah.
It's okay?
Okay, so good morning. I'm pleased to be here in the University of Florida. I'd like to thank you for your welcome. So, first about the presentation is that you're not supposed, when you do presentation, to clutter your presentation. You're supposed to be on message and to try to convey definite and precise thoughts. So I'm not going to do that. So my slides are cluttered and are confusing, and I'm not really quite sure of the message I really want to convey. So that was just an early warning that you can complain after. Now, when Pascal Urien invited me here to come here, he asked me to make a presentation on NFC, which is near-field communication, which is, as we're going to see, it is a way to put two computers or other devices in communication. So I told him I would not want to come here to do that. And he answered, "Oh, I understand, it's just a piece of hardware, so please do another presentation." And I said, well, why did he answer that? It's just a piece of hardware. So I decided to call my presentation "What's Hardware For?" And because I had kind of, it got me the feeling that hardware were useless. And so that's what the presentation will be about. So I have put here a disclosure. So the disclosure is that I think that in the world of smart card, there are 4 major inventions in history. So which is first the concept of smart card, integrated circuit in the card, which essentially which was first patented by Japanese and German researchers actually, and then put to fruition by a Frenchman, Roland Moreno, who took a lot of other patents and brought it to business. Then there is the microprocessor on a card, the concept to actually put a computer on a card, and that was a major advance done by a company in France called Bull at the time. Then there was the Java card, which was the idea of putting an actual a full operating system, open operating system on the card. And I do take some credit for that one. And the first one is the NFC, I'm going to talk about that, near-field communication. And which, as we're going to see, has created a new awareness of the concept of deep security in computers. And what I mean by deep security is the security concerned about the system itself, as opposed to security concerned about what you do with the system. So what else should I say about this, this slide? So there is a toothbrush. In fact, that's the one I forgot I forgot to take to Florida, which means I found myself, I forgot it at home, but it was in the presentation, so it's not that bad. I think we're ready. So the first thing I want to look at is what I call a near-field crocodile, or NFC. And what's interesting about that paper, which was published quite recently, is that it shows very close to here, actually, a crocodile, as you see. And you see that on the nose of the crocodile, there are pieces of wood. So why is that? It is because the crocodile has figured out that we are here in a swamp, and in the swamp there are birds, and the birds are in the swamp because the crocodile protects them from fowl, from their natural predators. Problem in that swamp is that there is not much wood, which makes it hard for the birds to build nests. And therefore they will go the extra lengths to find wood. The crocodile has figured that out, and therefore puts wood on its nose. The birds try to find wood for their nest, and they try to pick it up from the nose of the crocodile. That's not a good idea, because what happens next is that the crocodile eats the bird. And why is that a problem? Because if the crocodile eats the bird, then there is no nest. And if there is no nest, there is no little babies, and that's the point of my presentation when you can start crying. So the point here is that the concept of hardware is a very old concept, because this is probably the most primitive creature which is shown to understand the concept of hardware. And my point in the presentation would be to say that if the crocodiles understand hardware, it means that in us the concept of hardware is very well and very deeply wired. And the concept of hardware will probably, and I will try to demonstrate that, taint the way we see the world. So we probably, that would be the running hypothesis, we are probably structuring the world according to our understanding of hardware, which is old and ingrained, and perhaps not to start with things which are devoid of hardware implement to represent them. So that was about the near-field crocodile. So here is what we have in our mind, right, concerning hardware. Computers, lot of computers. You know, since here we're going to confirm about NFC, so we're gonna have the relationship of the hardware with other pieces of hardware, and in particular for NFC, the concept of proximity of two pieces of hardware. But again, we are centered here on the very core on the idea of hardware and what we do with hardware and how we structure our understanding of the world around the concept of hardware in kind of a cluttered way like that. So why does that matter? And why does that matter regarding modern protocol like NFC? So why it matters? Because the very concept of hardware, which is something that the crocodile understands, and which means that if the crocodile understands hardware, Wall Street analysts can probably understand hardware too. And which means that their view of the economy will be, again, tempted, or I would say, probably better, I would say, influenced or guided by the concept of hardware. And we can prove that here, because what happened about hardware is that so what you see on the top are two milestones of the stock market, of the French stock market, where you have the CAC 40, which is the equivalent, some rough equivalent of the Dow Jones in the United States. So the 40th most important company established in France. And one is Gemalto, which is by far the leader, if you want, in the world of cryptographic token for deep security. And what we see is that on 16th of July of last year, Apple said that they would put NFC in their iPhones. And that day, the stock of Gemalto jumped up. So the very word NFC, the concept of proximity of hardware, was enough to move one of the most important markets in the world up. What happened next, on the 11th of November 13, is that the reverse happened. Apple said that they would not be implementing NFC. That was exactly what they said, and that's what if you go to my reference here on the screen, you will see that it is exactly what the market analyst says. The very fact that Apple was not implementing a piece of hardware, which is NFC, was enough to reverse the previous move in the stock market. So, does hardware matter? Yes, it does matter. And it does matter to our everyday life and our economic well-being. So what I did is that I said, perhaps we could listen to the main player here with the Olivier Pugh, who is the CEO of Gemalto, and see what he had to say about that. So he did a series of interviews with Bloomberg, and I will just give you an extract of that interview, hoping that the sound will work. Pascal, that will be the time to show your metal. So I'm going to click on that, and it didn't work. Well, how do you get that to play? Sorry, it's here. Okay, so let's see. No. How do you do that?
I just want to come back very quickly to mobile payments, because I was looking at some notes, and according to researcher Gartner, mobile payment transactions are expected to rise from 235 billion this year to 725 billion in 2017. That's amazing. Were you seeing this coming?
So we are in the back office of all those various players that are interested, and I don't know if these numbers will be exact, but what is sure is that a lot of parties have an interest today to go to mobile payment. Of course, the banks, because they want to take advantage of the mobile, but also the mobile operators, the device manufacturers, the over-the-top players, you know, Apple, Google, Facebook, etc. So that battle is a highly coveted prize, and we don't participate in the battle. We supply, if you want, the ammunition to fight that battle.
So two things struck me in that interview. One was the over-the-top players, you know, Google, Facebook, Apple. And the second one is we provide, in that battle, ammunitions. So we will try to understand these two statements, because I know very well Olivier Pugh, and he's always working very hard on the message he wants to convey. So those sentences are really critical in trying to understand the situation, again, in the context of market moves which are affected by the very technology we're talking about. Over the top players, Apple, Google, Facebook. So what it means is that those are, in that view, above the security features of of the system, and they are over the top. But if you look at who these guys are, particularly right now Apple and Google, but we have others and we're going to see that later, is that actually the two mobile operating systems today which count, one is actually Apple with iOS, and the other one is Google with Android. In other words, the so-called here over-the-top players are the ones providing the underpinning of the functioning of a phone. And you could say the security features associated with how the phone is used come on top of that. Or specific security features may come on top of that, while the fundamental security features will certainly have to be considered by the very designer of the operating systems. So my point here is, who is over the top? I'm going to talk about that. The second one is, we don't participate in the battle, we supply the ammunition. And we understand hardware, and we sure understand ammunition skill. So what we need to understand is, what are those ammunitions? So we're going to talk about the hardware of the ammunitions. So in this environment, the ammunitions are actually the fundamental elements of security which are embedded in mobile systems. And they are very specific, and in fact they are specific in other interviews of the same kind of Schlumberger. And they mean the SIM, which is the SIM is the module and the cryptographic module, security module that you have in your phone, that we all have in all our phones. And the second one is the payment, if you want, the chip card, which is the means of payment associated with electronic protection on the right. And they are kind of put together. I just took a recent press release where you see that a collaboration of two companies, including Gemalto and another player, Telus, in the which is Interseed and Gemalto here. Are two companies teaming for a contract with a company called Telus. But it's important here is, I was not regarding the actual content of the business message, but the way it was phrased. And what you see is that you see the word secure appear 7 times. So you should get the idea that it is about security. And then it is attached to smartphone, tap, smart card. So these are the two elements, the ammunitions on the right and the left. Tap is the NFC we talked about, how to allow two computers to feel and to act in a close relationship. And the smartphone, which put it in the context of the mobile. So you see that the message that was on the previous interview also comes through this announcement. And the message is, in order to get the security you want, and you're sure you don't want it, it's said 7 times. What you need is that you need to tap your phone, provided that it has in it a smart card, which would exactly be expected. So the message is very clear, and what we're going to try now is to try to understand what are the underpinnings, what are the underpinnings of this message, and why did they need to be emphasized so much, and do they need to be emphasized so much? Because you would think that they are granted. If something is granted, you don't need to repeat it and to repeat it and to repeat it. So there is a small small difference here happening between the fact that something which should be obvious requires reinforcing. So there is probably something there which says it is not that obvious. And so we're going to look at the where is that actual battle, and maybe just maybe it's not about the ammunition but about the battle really. And I'm going to see that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to study briefly the history and the assumptions behind the idea that this is the security of the mobile phone, and behind the idea that it is security of electronic transactions. Let's start with the mobile phone and the SIM. SIM means subscriber identity module. What it says is that it is a part of the phone which contains your identity, and the idea is that the phone has. So here is a modern mobile network, and the key part in it is the SIM, which allows a phone to know who it belongs to, and then to advertise itself to the network in order for the network to provide access. And you might say, that's obvious. I mean, how else could you do it? The truth is that you could do it differently, and in fact it was done differently. Initially, the initial mobile networks didn't have this component. They were like it is on top. What happened here is that you came into an actual mobile network, and then you called into the network. That network knew you, and would put you in communication with other people on the same network. And there was no need for anything because they knew who the customers were. So far, so good. Then comes Europe. And when you are in the United States, if you want, you're big enough. When you are in Japan, it's big enough and it's an island. So those two major places were perfectly fine. In Europe, it's different. You have small countries all over the place and people move between the countries, so they wanted to be able to use their phones everywhere. So comes the question, how do I, from one network which belongs to somebody, they have put the antennas, they did all the work, and now you want to communicate with somebody who is similar, but from another country. How do you do that? If I am from Germany, I see a phone coming from a French subscriber, and I say, oh, I'm not going to let them talk on my network unless I'm sure that they pay me. So, we're talking about the beginning of the 80s here. Big meetings throughout Europe. And how are we going to do that? So the most obvious way to do it would be, again we are in this world on top, would be simply to say, because we are on the network, it's easy. When I receive in Germany a call from a French subscriber, since I am on the network, I have communication. I can say, here is somebody I don't know. Maybe I should ask the French network to tell me if they are ready to pay for that person. It's easy, right? It's as easy as making French and Germans talk together. That's the point. It's not easy. So, there were actually in France, in the French telecom companies, two engineers, and what they did is that, what has happened before, is that the French system of phones, you know the phones who went in the cabin, because there was a lot of burglaries on it with cash, they had replaced cash with smart card. So when you wanted to call, you couldn't have money, you had to have this card that you bought at the local store. And this had started to expand in the world, in Europe, and to extend to some countries like Mexico and other countries. So now we have started to have this smart card in place in the phone world. So what the French engineers did, they said, oh, maybe we can use this thing to put it here. This way, it's in there. We don't need to have the French and the German agree. It doesn't matter. We will put first the technical means of making sure that we know where somebody comes from. And then we will agree on who pays, because we'll have the means to recognize the people to start with. When that happened, that came into place, and that it actually worked. So first we put the technical means were put in place. Then what happened is that an industry started to grow around it. Where was that industry? Actually, in France and in Germany, and it is still there today. So now you had the full two countries which are very much influenced in their business ventures by the government, which had the means to put in place the policies they wanted to put in place. That was beneficial to their own companies. So everything was there to make it work. These are the two more powerful countries in Europe. I know there's also Great Britain, but as I say often, it is only half in Europe. What happened is that that was enough to create that connection. That was the technology. Then we go and we start developing that around the world, first in Europe and then in other parts of the world. Japan and the US, which resisted much more than the others, fell down into that system. Why? Because there was so many people using that the economics of it, you had economies of scale, and the operators in North America and in Japan were too expensive because their systems were tailored for their own means, and therefore they had to go to GSM, and that's the story of the modern story of phone. But again, there was absolutely no need technically, zero need to have that. It only came as a means to solve political, industrial problems. So that ammunition, which works very well, by the way, it was a good ammunition. But that ammunition was not based on an overwhelming technical need, it was based on a political need. It's only after that the story started to be reversed and said, well, we do that for security, and that no other way to do security. The message was good, was a marketing message, to continue to expand the power of these two companies and of Europe in the field in general, because particularly in Scandinavia. So here you have an economic move, you have an underwriting technical message, but the reality of the technical message is that it was never actually a mandatory storage. So that's the first part of the ammunition. Now we go to the second part, which is payment. 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 When we, you know, the original payment scheme, what you pay and you pay to your store, and the store the store happily reconciliates and goes to the bank to settle it. When came modern times, the concept, and here I will talk about the top, which is the US concept, was to say, I have somebody who has a letter of credit, in a sense, wants to buy some goods from me, I'm the merchant, and what they do is that they come, they say, I'm going to buy something, here's my letter of credit, and I want to be able to check that this letter is valid. So you get a card, credit card, was called, you show it to the merchant use that credit card to ask authorization to the banking system behind whatever it is, right? Now, here is the trick. In the US, local communications are free. So, for the merchant to make a call to the banking system, it is free. As it is free, they do it readily. Fine, system works, it works then, and it works today. Now, let's go down to this country, to these two countries, again, France and Germany and Europe in general. What happened, and I will tell the story of France because I know it better than the story of Germany, and maybe you can, since we have Germans here, maybe you will be able to help me. In France, local calls were not free. You had to pay each time. So if you made a call, you paid, I think, something like 30 cents a minute or whatever it was. Which means that the merchant, if they wanted to check the credit card, you know, they would have to pay by making a call. So they would not make it. What they would do is that they would be waiting till the end of the day and make one single call for all the transaction of the day. The problem with that is that it gave a lot of place for people to come in and present fake credentials. So the payment, if you want, modern payment system through the cards couldn't work for that reason. Nothing to do with security. Only something which has only to do with economics. What was the answer to that? Since there was, again, in those two countries by now, industries, lobbies, agreements, they said, oh, what worked for the telecom might work for banking as well. So what we're going to do is that we're going to put in there, the same way as we put something on the phone, we're going to put in the credit card something which allows the merchant to say, oh, this is a good credit, I can sell my good, and I'll be able to take care later of, at the end of the day, of making sure that all the transactions are done. So what happened now? Much later on, and I think Germany was the same story, was it? So exactly the same story. So what happened next? What came around was the internet. And the internet meant free calls. Therefore, you could use very well the American system, which itself started to reinforce the security by putting back-end systems which would, in real time, analyze the credit presented. Those were the first industrial use of expert systems, developed in the 80s. Actually developed in the 70s and deployed in the 80s. They were the back-end system of the American banking transactions, endpoint transactions. So, what is the story here? Is that in the same way as cryptographic tokens were put in phone, they were put in the banking system, but in both cases it was for political or economical reasons. Then it became, in the banking world as well as in the phone world, a story about security, saying, you know, we did that because it was much more secure, and now it's good for you because it's very secure and much better. All that story came later, and actually, in the same way as in the mobile world, it was never ever warranted. And by that I mean that there were other means to do it, and even today there are other means to do it. And in fact, where you see it very clearly is on remote payment over the internet. It's not for lack of trying to put actually the cryptographic modules in the banking system of the internet, but there the cost benefit ratio was not strong enough to do it. And today, as you know, you go on the internet, you call and or you put on your web form your card number. It goes to the same system as the American one, and off we go. It's working. So those ammunitions, they are actual ammunitions. They do work. They work well, but they've never been warranted as being mandatory. And that's why you have this underpinning of trying to constantly reinforce the story, and that's what we saw. So what's going on now, and why is that important? Because, and I call it does hardware matters, because many people have figured out what I just said. Which means that there are ways to enter the system, either the mobile system or the banking system, in terms of end-user transactions, which are not hardware dependent. So you'd say, here goes the hardware. So, in fact, what happens is that there are two ways this has been addressed in the past years. On the left, and here we're talking about virtual, and on the right, and here we're talking about ownership. So let's start with the left. Those cards, you know, are, whether it is the card on your phone or the card on your bank card, you know, you have to, these are physical goods. You know, you have to produce them, you have to distribute them, you have to secure them during transport. That's a lot of money. So the idea is to say, why do they need to be physical? Let's put them somewhere in the internet, because anyway, when you do banking transaction, you're on the internet. When you're on the phone, you're sure on the internet. So let's put that somewhere in the internet. Let's make it virtual. They don't need to be real. They just need to behave on the internet like they would otherwise. But why do we need to do it otherwise? Because we're always on the internet anyway. Therefore, you make virtual cards. And a company here called SimpliTap did just that, and in fact has agreed with Google to put that system into the phone. Actually, Is it science fiction? My phone had it. And the next phone you're going to buy probably will have it, unless it is an iPhone. And we're going to go again. We saw it before, and we're going to talk about it again. Then the next thing is to do virtual point of sale. So the idea is that you go to the merchant, and the merchant, whether you know it or not, also has, so you take your credit card, you do that all the way, and you put it in these boxes, right? You know what these boxes have in them? Another one of those cards. So what you have is that you have two pieces of hardware, one in both sides. So here, the first guy tried to remove the first one, then the second guy said, why not remove the other one? And now everything is in the internet, in the cloud. And so of course, that's what PayPal does. PayPal started to be very successful as a virtual company, no hardware goes anywhere. Start to take a big part of the business. The banks start to be very worried about it and try to be a competitor of PayPal. That comes too late. PayPal wins in that war. What happens next is that when people started to do virtual point of sales, which means to actually PayPal didn't quite replace those boxes. But then the companies come and say, now we're going to replace those boxes. This time, the banks said, wow, we got hacked by PayPal. This time we're going to react faster. And they do create, this is a second group in France, BPCE. And what they do is that they create try to create a virtual point of sale before somebody else does it. Actually, somebody else had done it because you have, for example, Square. So you already had, if you want, you started to see companies doing it, which means offering, in this case on the iPhone, the capability to use that box as a merchant to receive money from my clients. They saw that and said, wow, if there is no more card, if there is no more, so with a card you link with the end customer. If there is no more point of sale with another card, you lose your link with the merchant. If you lose your link with the client and with the merchant, then what do you do? And now you're in trouble. So what they said this time, no, okay, we're going to make our own terminal, virtual terminal. But what was very interesting when I saw that, I said, what's very interesting is that the same banks, if you are a manufacturer of these boxes, in order to deploy those banks, you have to go through very stringent standards, which have been created by actually the banks through their organization, like the Visa and the MasterCard and others. And they are very stringent. Suddenly you see a company coming, and suddenly being stringent is not important anymore. Why? Because they need to come in fast and try to counter the other guys. So suddenly this security story, which was so important, becomes less important. Because the world is changing. So now we're going to talk about virtual phone. Skype has, right now, 1/3 of international telephony. The very piece of the telephone network which was making the most money to the operators, which was the international communications, is gone. But not too much to worry about. We can solve that. We have the SMS, the short message. Short message, when telephony introduced the short message, what it really was is that they piggybacked on the original GSM specifications. There was a place to put, guess what? How many bytes? 128, and that's where the 128 limit comes from. So there was a place to put 128 characters. And so they said, well, 128 characters, we can put message in it, and we can share by the, we can charge by the message. I bet you that most of you have in your telephone bills a piece which is called SMS. Many of you use probably 2 per month, but you still pay like you did 10,000 per month. Some of you use 10,000, and some of you use 10,050, and then they pay the hell because they pay above what the rate is. Therefore, very good profitable business for the operator. Comes 2 guys, California, and they create WhatsApp. What does WhatsApp? Virtual SMS. So they say, since the phone is on the internet, why do we need to this specific special 128 place? But they are very smart. They don't change it with message, with 256 and everything. They still call it the same thing. It's still 128, so everybody understands it's the same thing. Therefore, people say, that's exactly the same thing, but it's free. So I'm going to take that. And here goes a big piece of the business of the operators. And that explains why Facebook bought that. Microsoft bought Skype. Facebook bought WhatsApp. Same transaction. And when Skype was bought was for $3 billion, I think at the time, that was considered enormous, completely crazy. Now completely crazy is at $17 billion. That's the virtual world. And then it culminates into virtual money. You go one step up. Since you are in the virtual ring, let's make the money virtual now. And let's get rid of those who have the power and the money, which are the banks. That was the last hold of power. Let's get rid of that. So you get rid of the phone operators, you get rid of the bank operators, you're all virtual, and suddenly a new economy is born, which, by the way, don't worry, they'll find their own ways to monetize that, but in a different manner. It is a change, a global change in the economy of the world. How will it pan out? We don't know yet. But is it a major revolution? Yeah, you see it on the left. So now suddenly you talk about ammunition and you say, what ammunition? And then it becomes even more deeper. It becomes deeper when you go to the right. And on the right you have the people who've already passed that. For them, that's ancient history. That's what you had to do in the past decade. If you didn't do it in the past decade, that's over. Now we are in a new decade. And the new decade, what you do is you do that. So it's not about hardware either on that side, it's about ownership. You want to own either the channel, and that's Google, Apple, Microsoft, or just own the client, which is Amazon and the Starbucks models so those two, in those two models, you create, like operators did, you kind of the old model mobile operator, when you have your clients and everything is done locally, and therefore you don't have to interact with everybody else, and you can have your own system. And you define your rules. And you don't care about those things. Here what you do is that you try to own the channel, because the channel can be monetized. And therefore, when you Apple, the good way to own the channel is to have your proprietary ways. Which is why they didn't put NFC in there. But they put, so they want to use other technologies. And it doesn't, and I'm going to say on the next slide, by the way, it absolutely doesn't matter what they do. So I'm not even going to expand on that because they've passed that also. They don't care. The hardware does not matter. That's happened. Google does it a different way. So instead of being proprietary, they are unproprietary, which means they proprietize the unproprietary. The way you do it is that you say you're very open. Once everybody is with you very open, you start to close the door. With the same thing, but done from a different perspective. At the end of the day, it has nothing to do with hardware. It all has to do in owning the channel. And the third one is Microsoft, which is trying to do, which is in a state of oscillation between Google and Apple, trying to do one or the other, and not really sure where it stands, which explains why now there is a major reshaping of that company, who has to decide which side they are. In fact, recently we saw exactly what I said, so you'd say that I am crazy or not aware. What happened with the recent Nokia acquisition, the first thing which we learned is that Nokia will start, now that they are on with Microsoft, they're going to start producing Android phones. If that's not something which is weird, what is? But if you understand it in that way, it is not, because hardware does not matter. So I would say, yes, I have to prove it now. I said, hardware doesn't matter, fine, you say it, but you still need to connect stuff to know they are close together, and you need to do that, right? We understand hardware. We are people, we know, we are crocodiles, we have wood, and know this, we understand. So what happens next is this. So this is I don't know if I can make it work. So in Spanish, I'll tell you what he says.
Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio dos luceros que cuando los abro perfecto distingo lo negro del blanco y en el alto cielo su fondo estrellado, en las multitudes el hombre que yo amo. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto.
So first, I'm sorry to interrupt it, because it's one of the most beautiful songs of humanity. What she does is that she sings about the five senses. And here it was about the eyes, ojos in Spanish, about the eyes, about the feeling, and how the senses are related to her understanding of life. And that's a gracias a la vida, which means thanks to life. But she says thanks to life through all the senses which makes her capable of expressing life. So when we talk about the very relationship of the individual, if you want, to its environment, she expresses very well that it's all about our senses. And so when we say, oh, we need to have NFC to put computers that can talk together, we say, what we're really talking about is putting people in a relationship. And let's try to think of how we could expand or understand the way computers can do it. So I take it from the top, the eye. The way we pay with Starbucks is by showing your optical tag. You do the same thing to take the plane, that's money. You know, the ticket that you pay for the plane. Now you go to any airport in the US, you don't use paper anymore. You use your cell phone, optics. I put the one on the top, which is the ears, and here I talk about square. So square, you think of it as a way to put a credit card and a phone, right? But look at it differently. What they did is that the connection is not via the standard USB plugs, it is acoustic. They plug into the acoustic part. You don't need to have that, you can simply make it separate and use the acoustic means. In fact, the company called Schlumberger, which has just been acquired, Israeli company which has just been acquired by Google, does exactly that. Using for relationship ultrasounds. That only pisses the dogs. Nose, what do they have to do with computers? It knows, smelling. In the Netherlands, what to do is that if you go in a store and you steal something, you try to steal something, the systems sends to you DNA-traced products, which can be trackable for 6 months. So for 6 months, you go around carrying this DNA, identifying you as the person who has stolen those goods. And you can smell it. No hardware. The hand, that's what the NFC does. But frankly, why do you need it? If I understand my world, if I am Google, and you put location on your computer, why did you put connection on? Because you wanted to know how to go to the hotel. Right there. We know where you are. We know that you are in this store. Soon we will know. In fact, Google has already a project to map the inside of stores. Why do you do that? Because you also know that you're in front of the counter. Why do I need an NFC for that? I know that you're in front of the counter. And I know that the other person is in front of the counter. I know that you're both there. You're in business. And the last one is taste. And because I wanted you to have to use your brain too, I let you find examples of that because I think you should do your part in the presentation. Now you're going to say, fine, but this thing is very hard to put in place, right? You need to put programs in place and to do this is, I'm talking about major programming. Okay, that's 5 lines of code now. So here is a company, Stripe, and what they did is that they used in all known languages, computer languages, their goal was to put a minimal software snippet to create financial transactions. So no more of this lengthy programming, PHP, blah, blah, all that stuff. You just say, okay, as a programmer, I'm working in one of those languages, here it is. And I'm sure that you can read it. Right? It becomes trivial to do it also from the perspective of putting it in place. So you take two together and you say, what about hardware? So I'm about done now. But I say, I come to a conference which is all about hardware. So that's not a good presentation. So I will say, before going there, so I will say I have to explain why I'm here. But before I wanted to say one thing, is that, as we said, we came from the decade of the 2000 to 2010, and the game was virtual. Then we got 2010, 2010, 2010, 2020, the game is ownership. But the game is kind of almost already played. What will be between 2030 and 2040? Where do you need to be? Then you go one next step up. And NFC is now near field cortex. And what we start working on is, in fact, to recreate this concept of economic transaction, this concept of relationship, and tries to correlate it directly with our actual brain functioning. It's even faster. Because now if I know that you think about buying my product, I might as well get that information straight from there. Because if I am in there, then I know why you want to buy it. I know what you bought before, what you're going to buy later. I know how much money you have. I know everything. Therefore, the current wave, if you want, is no longer owning the ownership. So the people who want to do virtual companies now, it's interesting, but you are where people were in the last decade. So now you say, oh, damn it, I understand. I'm not going to do that mistake. I'm going to go into ownership. It's just fine, but the other guys are already gone. That's where they are. Which is why you see a resurgence of artificial intelligence in all companies now on the internet. That's why, for example, Google just hired part-time, but hired Geoffrey Hinton, which is the #1 researcher in machine learning. Because the game now is already gone, and that's the next game. So if you want to create a company, call it Cortex. So that's where I need to go back to my original proposition and to say, no, you guys, I was wrong. I mean, I just made you something, it's just pictures, and that kind of, that cannot be related to the real world. So here is the real world. I forgot, it's about hardware. It's about NFC conference. You know this one? Who promotes the NFC, all these NFC conferences? Bingo. It's about hardware. Well, this is all about hardware. But what happened, this presentation in real time. Yesterday, what happened? Visa backs virtual cards. Visa backs virtual payments. Why do they do that? There are two possible reasons. One is to say, the world is moving, I need to move. Because you have to realize that Visa and MasterCard represent banks and represent, the two of them together, 80% of the world transactions. There is nowhere up, the only way down. So what you want to do when you're in that position is to protect. So you're not going to go up. You have American Express and you have others. So you stay there. And to stay there, you need to be everywhere there is something happening. So there are two explanations for that. One is to say, okay, I'm going to back the virtual world and try to think of what I do about the ownership world. Or another way, which is more cynical, is to say, let me back that up, and this way I show that I'm in there, and if it doesn't work, I can always say, it doesn't work. But you're winner in all cases. And therefore, what we see is that, yes, it's about hardware. This has, as we saw before, real consequences. So, again, we see Gemalto going down. I can make the case that 2 months from now, it's going to be back up again. But it doesn't change the fact that it matters. So that's the end of my presentation, I think. I hope it was somewhat informative. And I promised and I said that it would be confusing, so I hope it is.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Bertrand du Castel. Have you some question? So the question is there a future for the near-field communication, not cortex or what is, in your opinion, the futures of this technology? Say the near futures and the near market for that.
I think that whatever you do, you need to do it in the overall framework and understanding the overall framework. As I say, it matters. It has consequences. It exists. You have to be there, and you have your place in business. But don't go at it believing that this is all there is in the world. So you need always to have your venture in the right frame, and then you play it from there. So I was just saying, here is a sandbox, and the sandbox is wider than you might think. And I just hope I gave you an idea of which sandbox you're playing in, and then you can do whatever you need to do, and you will do it. But don't go at it naively, saying I'm the crocodile, and there's only one thing I know is to put my wood on the nose. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying do it smartly. Okay? Okay, so I thank you, and I guess I was just 10 minutes late, so
Okay.
that's life.
Thank you, Mr. Bertrand du Castel.